The Indianapolis Colts escaped Miami with a win, but did they get good enough play from their quarterback or good enough from their play caller and Shane Steichen? We talk about that here on Locked On Colts. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Hello, everyone. I am Zach Hicks, your favorite film nerd over at horseshoehuddle.com, and I'm joined, as always, early in the week here by Ben Boris at Colts Film Room over on Twitter. You know him. You love him. That is at Colts Film Room there on Twitter. Today, look, it's not going to be the most fun show, Ben, because we're not talking like a super positive Anthony Richardson performance, but at least we get to talk about Anthony Richardson this time. Like, I had fun. Look, man, I had fun the last 2 weeks coming on here talking, whatever came to our film nerd minds, but we get to finally talk about the quarterback, which that's a good thing in itself right there. So Anthony Richardson got the win. That's all that matters, right? QB wins, so we don't even have to go over the stat line. Just QB wins here. No, the stat line was 10 of 24 for 129 yards, no touchdowns, no picks, 14 rushes for 56 yards. The offense, really low success rate in this one, had a really tough day. I will say positive-wise, their last two drives did get three points on the board. Each drive got 3 points on the board, which was enough to win this game. So a good finish for this offense and a good finish for Anthony Richardson, but up until that finish, it was a pretty brutal day for the young quarterback. He avoided the massive mistake outside. I mean, the fumble loss in the backfield was obviously a massive mistake.
That's not just him though. Like, that's probably.
Yeah, that's more of a fluky one. Like, it's not an overthrow or forcing a pass or anything like that. So he avoided that massive mistake, and they beat on an inferior opponent. So not all bad in this one, but again, Ben, you and I we're pretty realistic when we talk about Anthony Richardson, where it's like, this is a 22-year-old quarterback. There are going to be a lot of growing pains, but as of right now in year two, maybe aside from the Houston game where it was kind of bombs away early in that game, we haven't seen much progression from this young quarterback. And in some ways, we've seen a little bit of regression from him. That doesn't mean that's what he's going to be his entire career, but so far, there are a little bit more warning signs in Anthony Richardson's play than maybe what there were coming into this season. And that is, a little bit concerning right there.
Yeah, and I think I want to make it very clear when we talk about Anthony Richardson that I don't think either of us are writing him off by any means or saying that I'm trying to make some sort of sweeping take about like what Anthony Richardson's future as the quarterback of the Indianapolis Colts looks like. I do think it's also just very fair to say the standard doesn't need to change because of how he's playing. The standard should be high. I mean, he was the number 4 overall draft pick. We know that he's an athlete. We know going in that he was always going to be able to avoid the sacks. Those things are cool. Those things are great. We know he's a unique one-of-one unicorn athlete. We know all those things. There's some things that he still just needs to play and learn and develop, and those are all true. But we also can it's also okay for us to sit here and say, hey, it hasn't been good enough. It really hasn't been good enough. 3 points in the first half and really 16 in total is going to really be tough when you go to play defenses that obviously are good, but when you're maybe not having the same success on the other side of the ball and you need the defense to come and play. And I think when you look at this Colts team, it's like, okay, well, how critical can we really be? Because they've won 4 of their last 5. They started out 0-2, and they're now above 500. Anthony Richardson has struggled to maybe stay on the field. I think we can probably say that at certain points. He's back. And it'd be good to see him build off of something. Like, I feel like every time he tries to do that, it's another unfortunate injury that seems to happen. So I don't think I'm writing off Anthony Richardson or making any real sweeping takes, but I also think that it's okay if we sit here and say, hey, it wasn't good enough from the play caller. We'll get into all that, and we can acknowledge some of the context, but we don't need to make the context excuses where, hey, he can definitely be playing better. There was some inconsistency with footwork. The accuracy is something that still is a work in progress. And then honestly, like, he probably needs a little bit more help from his play caller as well. But there were some good things. It wasn't all bad, but I think there's some bad that consistently is showing up week to week that it's like, hey, I think we can ask Anthony Richardson to play better quarterback as much as he is a good athlete.
Yeah, and that's one thing I really wanted to hype on here is, yes, when you watch this game on film, it wasn't the best designed game by the play caller. I mean, Shane Steichen was very adamant in this. So I know he usually takes the fall for his quarterback, but this one, even as someone who just watches film, it was like, yeah, this one felt a little bit more on Steichen than maybe the Bears or the Packers games where Richardson was missing open guys in those games. Outside of
wasn't a lot of guys open.
Yeah, maybe like one or two misses in this game, really, from Richardson, and even then, it was like a miss by a hair.
There's some inflated a drop by Alec Pierce.
Yeah,
a really nice play that gets called back for illegal formation, but also I think you can make the argument there was some offensive pass interference. It was iffy. They got the call defensively. There were some good things. There was the field side comeback to A.D. Mitchell. There was another one that he hit on another comeback, really, off jet motion. So there were some really good throws in this game, too. It wasn't all terrible. It also hasn't – it's really weird, and that's why I've really struggled to have the kind of thoughts and kind of – I needed the extra day, to be honest with you, to put together – I think we both did – to put together on this because it's like, hey, like, this is an above 500 football team. It's obviously going to go play a really tough stretch of games, but there's things that they're doing to beat themselves. Like, we can talk about the defenses they've played and how and how Anthony Richardson has played versus those defenses. You can also make a lot of arguments. It had nothing to do with the defensive coverage calls. They beat themselves. So that's what I think is almost encouraging in a lot of ways is, hey, we don't have to say, okay. Like, when we evaluate Anthony Richardson, we need to talk about how awesome the defenses are playing. Like, he can go play against good defenses. You're going to see all those every year in the NFL. If you want to get to the Super Bowl, which everyone's intention is when you draft Anthony Richardson, they're going to have to beat those teams along the way. If you want to make it to the playoffs, you're going to have to succeed against those teams along the way. So, like, a lot of it seems to be beating themselves more than anything, whether it's inaccurate passes, in unfortunate play calls, free runners, all those kind of things that we'll get into. But ultimately just inconsistencies again.
Yeah, and I want to get to my overall points on Richardson because you've kind of gone into yours a little bit there, and kind of my long list of notes to kind of really put them all out there for you guys is, yeah, this was not a good enough game from Anthony Richardson. And like you said, like, just because he's a young quarterback doesn't mean that we need to drop our standards. Maybe we lower our expectations, but our standards don't lower. We still have the same standards for quarterback play, which is be a reason why we win, not a person that we have to win in spite of. And in a lot of ways in this game, again, the Colts had 9 of 13 drives that were under 5 plays in this game. And it wasn't like the Houston game where that's a positive, where they were scoring within 5 plays. Like, they were not scoring within those drives. They were going 3 and out in a lot of cases. That's not good enough. That hurts your defense. It hurts your team, and you're not winning games that way. So, yeah, there were a lot of things on him in this game where it's like missing some throws. There were plays where the ball needed to be out a little bit quicker. There were times they needed to get hot. He needed to recognize the blitz a little bit earlier. Even sometimes on the gives and don't gives on the run plays. Like, there are some times that he missed an opportunity to take the ball and run it himself. Other times where, especially around the goal line, where he wants it himself and he kind of tries to get in there instead of giving it to the advantage player. But I will say this, because again, this is not the most positive episode on Richardson, and they really haven't been lately, but just to kind of end this on a fairly positive note, when you have a quarterback like Anthony Richardson, even with the inaccuracies, with the poor success rate, I always have made the argument that having a mobile quarterback does raise the floor of your offense. And we did see that a lot in this game in terms of the run game floor was raised so high. Like, this was not a great game from the rushing attack, and they still ran for over 4 yards a carry and 155 yards with, again, like, Tyler Goodson. I love his explosion. Not the best vision as a running back, but great explosion. Trey Sermon runs like he's in quicksand, but he's a physical runner. Like, this is not like they're not rolling out top tier running backs. So to get 155 yards on the ground and Richardson being a big part of that is because of him being on the field. And then again, like we've seen in a lot of these games, the Colts were tied in the fourth quarter of this game. They needed drives to string together to win this football game. They went down and scored on 2 consecutive possessions late in this game, really put it together. Richardson, I think, was 5 of 6 passing on those drives and also added some more converted, I think, 3 third downs with his legs in that on those last 2 drives. Like, did some really good things. So
it should have been worse, to be honest with you, because
yeah.
of all the sacks that he did. Like, he didn't take a sack. Probably if it's Joe Flacco in there, I'm not sure they win that game, just based off the fact that, maybe Joe Flacco has the toolbox to maybe get them in the right pass protection pre-snap, but he's not evading any of these sacks. No. So, like, Anthony Richardson being able to keep the offense on schedule from that perspective was really nice. And yeah, I think that you can ultimately draw a lot of positives. Well, I don't know. In the darkest days, there's some light or something, whatever that phrase is. Like, it wasn't all bad. I think that when you turn on the tape week after week after week and you see everything that you knew you were getting with Anthony Richardson day one, the insane athlete, the ability to make plays with his feet, the ability to really put stress on the defense from that perspective, you're seeing that. It's the fact that, what happens when defenses start to take away some of the things that you do well, which we'll get into in the next segment, and force Anthony Richardson to do things that make the easy plays. He can make the hard plays look real easy and the easy plays look almost impossible.
Yeah. I definitely think it's an issue, and it's been an issue for him this season. But overall, again, if we're grading this on a letter scale, maybe a D+ type of game. Like, you get a little bit of that plus because the rushing ability and negating some of the big negative plays. But again, the standard for the quarterback play in Indianapolis doesn't need to drop even if the expectations are a little bit lower. So it needs to be better from him going forward. I do think he salvaged it a little bit late in this game, but going forward, we don't need salvaged performances. We need productive performances. And he knows that. The Colts know that. This
is nothing that they're not saying.
Yeah.
This is nothing that they're not feeling it in the meeting rooms. This is nothing Anthony Richardson isn't saying to himself after the game. Like, it's not that he probably holds himself to a higher standard than we are on this show. So I don't think this is outlandish to say that Anthony Richardson could be playing better football than he is right now to help his team win.
Yeah, and now that we've held Anthony Richardson accountable for his game, so we want to make sure we get that segment out of the way first, because if we started with the other one, we would sound like we're making excuses for him. We're not. We want to talk about this whole topic, which is both ends of this, and talk about where, like, Shane Steichen, the guy who had all the answers last year and had a really good fundamental, system going on with Gardner Minshew and even with Anthony Richardson early in the season last year, they don't really have the answers for a lot of these defensive coordinators this year, and we've seen it too many times this year. So we're going to talk about Shane Steichen and talk about the overall game plan and what we saw on film from the Colts play caller against the Miami Dolphins coming up in just a second. But first, NFL fans, you can spark the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Look, Anthony Richardson is perfect for this because he starts games slow, finishes strong. You can bet the over on the rest of his yards and touchdowns and everything the rest of the game, because in the fourth quarter he's going to be able to turn it on a little bit. So you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. The Colts this past weekend were 3-point favorites. If you guys bet on the hometown team, you would have won there over at FanDuel. Again, that's FanDuel.com. And also, when you guys are hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. Look, guys, I've been on both sides of the hiring spectrum in my time here in the work industry, just for writing and also for my retail job. LinkedIn is the best place to go for all this stuff. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even if those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Ben Boris at Colts Film Room joining me for our weekly film session on Anthony Richardson, or just on the Colts in general if Richardson misses the game. Now, in this one, we are talking Shane Steichen in this next segment. We're going to talk about where some of the issues lie in this Colts offense, where they're not finding some answers, where last year they were finding answers, and kind of how that plays into Richardson's development. Now, for me to set the stage a little bit, Shane Steichen brought here as the Colts head coach primarily, I mean, not entirely, but primarily because of his work as an offensive guru and what he's been able to get out of young quarterbacks. I mean, Justin Herbert with the Chargers, Jalen Hurts with the Eagles did some really great stuff. And I think one of the best things about Shane Steichen and his time with those two teams is how he's been able to find the right offense for these guys. I mean, Justin Herbert, this pure vertical play action game, we're pushing it down the field, and he has the highest ADOT in the league, and he's going crazy with that vertical passing game. Jalen Hurts, we're going to install a lot of the Oklahoma offense, a lot of quick hitters and bubble screens and QB run stuff. Gardner Minshew last year, a lot of RPO and just get the ball out of his hands in the RPO stuff. He's been able to find things that work for his quarterbacks. And I don't know if he's found that yet in the passing game for Richardson. I think he is toying with some things. There are a lot of vertical breaking routes, and I think he's getting a lot of four verts mixed in, a lot of just kind of vertical stop routes and stuff where Richardson can really just drive the ball. And then the QB run game, I think, has actually been a really big plus to what he's calling and what he's designing. But when we look at these inconsistencies early in games for Richardson and just for the Colts offense, especially when Richardson starts, there are a lot of times where it's like, what are we doing why are we just spamming play action vertical all game long? It worked in week 1 against the Houston Texans. Why is it taking us until halftime in a lot of these Richardson starts before we start mixing in these diverse QB runs and diverse runs in general? And we're just kind of doing all these play action spam vertical things early in games. So I do think he's kind of struggling to find that perfect offense for Richardson, which isn't uncommon. Like, it's 9 starts in a Richardson's career. Like, you're not going to have all the answers right now. I mean, Jalen Hurts, it took him until year 2 with Hurts to really find the right offense for him. But I do think this is a little bit concerning on from Steichen's standpoint. And you even have more concerns when it comes to facing style of defenses that they faced against Miami this past week.
Yeah, I think it's again, I want to clarify the same way I started with Anthony Richardson. Is like staffs have stinkers where they just put out a terrible plan and they go look on Monday and they review it and they were like, what are we doing? Here are the fixes we need to make schematically. Like, they have that same sort of process, the same way that they'll grade players tape. They're going to grade themselves from the way that they call plays. I'm assuming that this will not come across very positively. I'm sure those meetings were really constructive in that regard. Yeah, and there's a lot of vertical play actions in on certain concepts that I just don't think that needs them. Where it's like, I think a lot of it is to help Anthony Richardson keep his footwork clean. I think he probably has, hey, if we are using play action from the gun, we can keep Anthony Richardson's footwork cleaner than a 5-step drop with multiple hitches to keep him on time. So that's, I would imagine that the mesh for the play action basically takes away a second hitch if the routes are taking longer to develop. That would be my guess. I would also say that a lot of what they're trying to do is sacrifice efficiency for explosion. So
Yes.
This is probably one of the least efficient offenses in the league. There's so many 3-and-outs, a lot of low percentage throws all over the board, but they basically will say, hey, we'll sacrifice a couple 3-and-outs if Anthony Richardson can make the 60-yard pass, take the life out of the defense, and flip our win percentage the entire way because we totally just jumped the side of the field, and now we're in the red zone and we can totally open up a whole new thing of our offense. That's what Shane Steichen wants to do. I think his philosophy is what traditional low percentage throws are in the NFL aren't low percentage to him. He would disagree with a lot of that. And I think that's where this is coming from. I think we're also seeing, hey, what does it look like when a team goes fire zone and you have pressure now and you might be hot and you're trying to run a play action 5-step drop from gun, and it doesn't look very pretty. And I think that might be the tipping point on the scale to be like, hey, we need to find some balance offensively. I had some additional concerns kind of where it's like, where is the answers for Anthony Richardson when pressure is coming pre-snap and it's coming pre-snap? Where's the hots? Where's the sight adjusts? Where's the different mechanisms that Anthony Richardson has to get into a play that can punish defenses for bringing pressure and not, hey, we know that there's going to be a free runner. Our quarterback is so athletically gifted. We know he's avoiding the sack and can make a playoff schedule. Like, I don't think it has. I think good offenses aren't that rigid. I think it's probably unsound to say otherwise. I think Anthony Richardson probably needs more answers in that regard, and especially going to play a team like Brian Flores, where you're going to get a lot of that. You would hope that you can provide him with better answers for that in that game plan.
Yeah.
I don't think all hope is lost. I think Shane Steichen, again, is a great coach, and he has put together these stinkers before in his career, not just in Indianapolis, by the way. He also had it in Philadelphia. There were plenty of games where the offense didn't look as great. And I'm sure that's good play callers and good coaches that stick around for a long time are willing to learn from that and adjust to see what their team needs and where they failed in that regard. So, again, that's kind of my overall thoughts with Shane Steichen. But again, it's like, I don't want to be so hyperbolic when you know that this guy's a really good play caller and they've created a really explosive offense versus some high quality defenses.
Yeah. And a couple of points I want to hit on too, and then we'll jump into our final segment and just kind of talk about where the Colts are going from here. But to kind of add to your point on the Colts have sacrificed efficiency for explosion. They're the third most explosive offense in football. And they're probably like the worst efficiency, or probably bottom 5 in efficiency. I haven't looked at that one, but explosion, I know they're
You can only guess.
Yeah. I believe they're third most explosive in football right now. They just moved to third most explosive. And I think it's a really poignant point that you make there with, yes, the Colts are sacrificing that efficiency for explosion. They were doing it with Joe Flacco too. Flacco was just taking a lot of checkdowns to running backs on those explosive plays and passing up on a lot of the explosion. But here's kind of my thinking with Richardson. I think this is where the second half is why the Colts are like better in the second half than they are in the first half, especially throwing the ball, is like, if you want to have this hyper explosive passing game and sacrifice the short stuff, you have to run the ball well early in the game. Like, they have to run for me personally, the way I view it is, if you're going to sacrifice short passing, because Richardson is this ungodly talented quarterback who can push the ball down the field, and that's where he's most comfortable too, is pushing the ball down the field. You have to build so much up in the run game early and take your shots off of that run game. Whether that's your running backs performing well, whether that's using Richardson in the run game. I mean, they have a really good QB run game design. I think it's fantastic. Like, it's really, really good.
I thought what they did this week was great.
Great. Richardson protected himself really well until he got within the 10-yard line. Then he became Psycho Richardson again after getting inside the 10-yard line. But
he's good at do that. Like,
that's who he is.
I think it's really well kind of quick about the quarterback run game. It's like I agree full-heartedly that's got to be a part of their offense. They can never get away from that, because that's honestly that's what kept this offense from being total, like, bad to miserable. Like, that raised the floor of the offense every single week, because Anthony Richardson is just that gifted, and Shane Steichen is really good at putting him in positions to create explosive runs.
Yeah, and again, my quick point that I really want to get to, though, is when you do the explosive pass game, like, you build your offense around the explosive pass game, it can't be 3 straight passing dropbacks, play action dropbacks with vertical passing. Like, it can't just be 3 straight and then 3 and out if your quarterback doesn't hit on them. That can't be your design. Like, you have to mix in some short stuff. And I'm not saying you have to go full Kansas City where it's all screens, or go full Washington with quick screen or run on every first down. I'm not saying you have to do that. But you either have to incorporate those things early on to set up the explosion, or you have to run the ball well enough with your quarterback and your run game and then build the explosion plays off that. It can't just be play action drop, play action shotgun, vertical
They're
pass.
Obsessed with it.
Yeah,
they're just obsessed with it.
And look, it's awesome when it hits, but doing that 3 straight plays and then going to the sideline and putting your worn out defense back on the field is just not effective football, especially when we live in this too high world where the best offenses are the ones that are doing the quick screens every single play. So either mix in some of these short concepts in these quick screens and build a short game, or make your short passing game your running game and just become a pseudo Ravens team. I mean, look what Lamar Jackson, especially early in his career, they ran the ball so effectively, and then their passing game was so explosive off of that. that work there, but you have to be able to like commit fully to being this run dominant team that builds explosives off of it, or you have to accept a little bit of the modern passing NFL offense, which is quick screens and isolation routes, and they have downs for that stuff. Like they can do it. So like, yeah, we have to jump to our third segment real quick, Ben, and then I'll let you get your point in here. But yeah, I really think that they have to change it up a little bit. It can't just keep spamming big explosive pass plays, because unless you're just having Richardson throw 50-50 balls, it's not going to work. And he's not throwing them right now. So that's my long-winded spiel there. We're going to jump into our final thoughts and just kind of where the Colts go from here and where this team goes going forward after a quick word here from Game Time. Guys, Game Time Sports is my favorite place to get tickets for any event. I'm a big concert guy. I go to a bunch of punk shows and rock shows near me. Basketball season starting up, hockey season. I know you guys in Indiana aren't the biggest in terms of like hockey because you don't have hockey teams, but I go to my Washington Capitals games all the time. I love watching the Caps and out there in basketball. Look, Hoosiers, you got Indiana Hoosiers coming up. You got the Indiana Pacers, Tyrese Halliburton looking like a superstar, especially the first half of last year. If we can get back to that, the Pacers can be pushing for an NBA championship this year. Game Time is the best place to get tickets for all your Pacers games this year. Game Time picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Game Time has some really cool features too that I personally love, like all-in pricing. If you toggle that feature, it shows you the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. You get seat views, so you get that panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy the lowest price, and you also get the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Some really awesome features there from Game Time. Again, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, Ben Boris at Colts Film Room. As always, we're running late on time because that's just how we roll on these. These episodes are 34, 35 minutes of our 30. But yeah, man, like I think this Colts team is in a really weird place because statistically, we should feel really good about the offense and meh about the defense right now. Personally, just vibes wise, I feel okay about the defense. Like they're competing. Like, yes, I have my concerns, but secondary is playing some good ball. Offense, I feel more concerned than what the advanced stats say. But like, I'm not terribly concerned. I'm in a weird place with this team. They're 4-3, and it's not like they don't have quality wins. Like the Chicago win was a quality win. Pittsburgh win, very quality win, especially with two quarterbacks playing in that game for you. And at this point in the year, I mean, outside of Pittsburgh and Jacksonville, the Colts just haven't had good quarterback play this year, and they're sitting at 4-3. So it's an interesting team right now, Ben. Like I think the team is in such an interesting place to where you really can't say like Richardson's the reason why we're losing or this or that or whatever.
I don't even think that's true.
No,
I think you could make the argument. You could make that argument. You could make that argument about potentially Houston. You could make that argument maybe about Chicago, but they won the game. So like, yeah, it's a really weird team because you are above 500. When you look at situations around the league, I think Indianapolis is in a far better situation than a lot of the teams currently. They don't even now and the future. And it's 4-3, and anything can really happen in the NFL. So if you told me we're going to be 4-3 at the start of the year, I'd sign up for it right now, because I probably didn't have the option to sign up for 5-2 and 6-1. So, it's really weird. It's ultimately really weird, and I think that this stretch could be the greatest thing to happen in the Indianapolis Colts, and they just start building confidence and getting better and better, or they totally crumble. And I think that's up to them in that locker room to decide how it's all going to look. But I think you can become real scared of this gauntlet and admit these teams are better. I don't think they're thinking like that in the locker room. I think they're thinking to themselves, hey, we're 4-3 and we haven't even played good football yet. So like, we have an opportunity to do it versus good teams and build some serious confidence.
Yeah, and again, I think this offense looks just insurmountably better with Jonathan Taylor out there alongside Richardson. I mean, we saw the Chicago game. Like, I would still say that the Chicago game was Richardson's worst game of the season. Like, it was just a terrible, terrible game from Anthony Richardson against Chicago. And they still put up 21 points against a really good defense because they had that dynamic duo of Richardson and Jonathan Taylor. So once you get Taylor back, and like we said in the last segment, you can lean on that ground game a little bit, maybe not become the Greg Roman Ravens, but like close to it, I guess, in terms of the running game, where you just really pound the running game. You know, the Colts are doing a lot more 12 personnel too right now, really pound it out on the ground, and then you can build your explosives off that, and they'll hit a little bit more. And the one of the better things about this next stretch of games, right, is the Colts have had to survive these first 7 right now, outside of the Jacksonville game, which they lost. But the Jacksonville game was the only bad defense they faced to start this season. All the other defenses are good that they have faced. This next stretch, it's like decent defenses to below average defenses. Now you're going against great
elite
offenses.
offense. You're going against an elite offense. Yeah.
But I think that's a bigger opportunity for this offense to maybe figure some stuff out. Like, the Colts defense has been able to figure some stuff out against some really bad offenses. So maybe the Colts offense can figure some things out against, a Bills defense that's really banged up, a Detroit defense that's really banged up, a Houston defense, which has been pretty good, but they've had some ups and downs. And what's the other? Well, Vikings defense. That we're not going to talk about the Vikings defense there, but I do think they can maybe find their rhythm a little bit in what should be higher scoring games too than 16-10. So I don't think all is lost anyway. Like, they have to get through this gauntlet, at least win 1 to 2 of these games in this gauntlet if you want to be a playoff team. Which, look, they're 4-3 right now. Again, they've beaten 2 as of right now playoff teams in Chicago and Pittsburgh. So there's no reason to think that they can't compete in these games. So yeah, I don't see any reason to be super negative about this team. Richardson, sure, the panic level is a little higher right now than what it was in week 1, but it's not blaring sirens. Like, I'm not sitting here going, "Oh my God, he's done. He's done." Like, yeah, I'm concerned.
He's gonna he can and should get at least until the end of the next year to figuring out if he's the quarterback, or really however long it takes for him to be the quarterback, for them to make that decision if he's the franchise quarterback of the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah. Yeah, so
it's not. I wouldn't say it's blaring sirens either. I think there's a lot of like things that can tell you, hey, like, he looked really good in that Steelers game. He obviously had some really flashy plays at home versus Houston. It'll be really interesting to say, hey, you're playing Houston again, a team that he's had, I don't want to say success with, but he's played some of his best football versus that team. Again, I think we're going to look back at this gauntlet, and this will make or break the season. So get ready, because we're past the thing of, it's early. It's not early anymore. We're getting into November. This is going to be a huge game, kind of stretch of games to figure out what this team really is, and then kind of tell you what they're going to look at going into the offseason.
Yeah. Yep. So a big thing for this Colts team going forward, again, figure out your blitz checks. Very big thing, especially with Brian Flores coming up. And even D'Amico Ryans to a degree. I think it's a good test beforehand because he mixes in some really good blitzes as well. But figure out your blitz checks, build your layups, so whether it's the run game or the passing game, whatever it's going to be. And then look, the explosives can still be there, baby. Like, look, I'm full on the explosive train when it comes to offense. I love me some explosives.
We just need this a little bit more efficiency, where it's like, hey, let's give our quarterback let's get him in some rhythm that he's really never had since maybe the second half of the Rams game.
Yeah, and look, some of it is on him for missing throws and just not finding that rhythm, but also it's an offense that's not asking him to be in rhythm. Because if the way that this offense has been called to start the season, him in rhythm would be like 7 straight 50-yard bombs, which isn't realistic. Like, that's kind of how this offense is being called. It's kind of an offense that's like begging for a low completion percentage right now. Like not as low as what Richardson.
I don't think there's anything. I'll say this: everyone loves to talk about Anthony Richardson's completion percentage. There's nothing in this offense that would tell you that number should be high. Like, this is not
high. Yeah, high 50s maybe,
doing,
but like,
so that's what.
Yeah,
there's nothing that they're doing. Yeah, it can be better, obviously, but there's nothing in this offense that tells you that this should be towards the top of the NFL or really at the median, because that's how they're trying to play football. So there's nothing I'll put it this way: there's nothing Shane Steichen's doing to help inflate that number.
It's a little Pep Hamilton rookie year Andrew Luck, that 57%. Now it's a very different style of offense. It's not Bruce Arians, style of offense, but it is very similar in terms of We want you to be like a 58% passer with like, every completion going for like 25 yards. Like that's kind of what they want in this offense. And to me, in today's modern, like maybe that works in 2012. I don't know if that's a good way to play football nowadays. It'll work against some teams. It'll really work against some teams. I mean, especially static defenses like Pittsburgh and to a degree, Houston in week 1 was a little bit static too. But it does not work against these very diverse moving defenses with good secondaries like we saw against Tennessee, which wasn't even Richardson, but Tennessee also did some good things there. And then this past week against Miami. So they'll have to change some things. Again, if it were me, I'd lean heavier on the run game, be more diverse in the run game, keep mixing in the QB stuff. I mean, again, for the most part, Richardson did a good job protecting himself in this past game until he got inside the 10-yard line, which, that's how he's going to be. So yeah, I think you can do a lot of good things with that stuff. So we'll see going forward. I mean, Ben, you have any final thoughts on this topic, and then we'll get out of here?
Yeah, I think ultimately, when you look back at this game, it wasn't necessarily the performance I think that Anthony Richardson wanted when after all the noise of Joe Flacco and he should be the starting quarterback and all that kind of stuff. It also doesn't matter because I don't think he cares. And I think when you look at this next stretch of games, we can take this kind of so-so performance and then, hey, let's try and build on some of the positives. Let's try and fix a lot of the negatives. And we could look back in this gauntlet of games where really nobody expects Indianapolis to be a favorite in any of them. And it could be the best thing that happens to the team all season or the worst. So that's up to them and the people in that locker room and the coaches.
Look, man, just get out of this next stretch with 2 wins, get into that final 5, and you have to win 4 or 5, and you'll be a playoff team. So we'll see. I think this Colts team's going to be competitive until the final whistle like they always are. And, hey, look, we got the jokes already going around. Shane Steichen is the Mike Tomlin of offensive coaches. He's going to find a way to get those 9 wins, baby. He's going to find a way to get those 9 wins. But we shall see. I do want to thank you guys for making Locked On Colts your first listen today. Now, for your second listen, go find the new Locked On NFL now with 2 shows every day. First, the Madman Tyler Rowland kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso, and then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube where we list your podcast. And if you guys don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, at Zach Hicks 2, and at Colts Film Room, all on Twitter. Also subscribe to us on YouTube wherever you listen to your podcast. We love you guys' ratings and views, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow afternoon.